The interesting feature of this house is the door hood supported by carved brackets with pendles or terminal drops on the front of the brackets. An example of the first period is the Adams Clark House at 93 West Main Street, which dates between 1716 and 1740. The architectural interest here is the ornate paired brackets under the deep cornice which projects around the house and end gables. Notice the pointed attic window in the end gable in contrast to the other plain window frames. Though not visible in the photograph, the front bay windows are bordered with the same style of carved rope molding as seen previously. And this is the Jeremiah Dodge House, which was moved from Bailey Lane to this site at 153 West Main Street. It was the birthplace of George Peabody's mother, Judith George. Through that fortunate circumstance, Georgetown was the recipient of funds and books from George Peabody for the building of our first town library. This is an example of the bungalow style of the 1920s and 30s. Typically, the bungalow has widely overhanging gables forming a porch at the front and emphasizing the natural quality of materials such as stained earth stones and natural fieldstone. Further along on West Main Street is the Flint Weston House, built in 1732. This colonial is near the Trestle Way housing development. Returning to the square, we view West and East Main Street around the mid-1860s. On the right is the Memorial Church. And this photograph was taken in 1865 at the square. The first three buildings on the left were destroyed in the fire of October 26, 1874. In the far background is South Church on Elm and East Main Street. Mr. Pettingill, the blacksmith, is the gentleman holding the horse. Next to our town's parking lot is the office of Dr. Howard Hill. Once Memorial Church Parsonage, it was also known as Russell Daniels' house. Judith Peabody Daniels, sister of George Peabody, lived here, which was another reason for George Peabody's affection for Georgetown. During the early 1920s, this was also the location for Merton Roberts' funeral home before the move to Pleasant Street. Across the street, the C.B. Hills Furniture Shop in the building known as Dunbar's Tavern. This 1.5-story Carpenter Gothic home was popular in the mid-1800s. Notice the barge boards at the eaves. The invention of the jigsaw allowed carpenters to copy what, before now, had been carved out of stone. As a result, elaborate carvings and fretwork began to appear on homes. We saw some of these examples on West Main Street homes. And this presently is the Bay Bank. Here we have a pedimented portico supported by white Doric columns. This used to be Dr. Edward M. Hoyt's house. Let's turn off East Main to Union Street. Little known and very short, it borders one side of Harry Murch Park. At number 5 is the Dresser House. The kitchen is half of what was originally a trading post. The trading post was built in 1675 on Nelson Street. In 1800 it was moved to this site and, at that time, was the only building between Square and Elm Street. Back on East Main Street, we proceed to the Captain Samuel Brocklebank Museum, which is owned and operated by the Georgetown Historical Society. This was photographed at the turn of the century before the side porch was enclosed. At one time, it was the parsonage for Reverend Beecher, who served South Church from 1857 to 1881. The church was directly across the street on the green, as it appears today. Note the L in the rear on the right side. You recall earlier we saw Little's block, the 4-story brick structure in the square. It is in this L that the Little brothers, Benjamin and Joseph from West Newbury, opened their first store and shoemaking place around 1808. Many of Georgetown's citizens had small shoe shops alongside their homes where they would cut and partially assemble shoes in the manner of cottage industries today. The shoes would then be sold to the large shoe factories in town to be completed. The Little brothers would trade their store goods for odd lots of these coarse shoes. At first, they located their business here at East Main and Elm, where activity centered around the church. But as roads improved, businesses gravitated to the square. So in 1814, the Littles erected the brick building in the square. The front room on the east or right side of the house was Nelson's Tavern. Prior to the Nelson's Tavern, which was owned by Dudley Tyler, and this is the fireplace in the tavern room. To the right of this photo is Baldpate Inn's dinner gong. The small enclosed stone compartment in the cellar, this is thought to be part of the Underground Railroad, which existed during the Civil War period. The slave hole, as it is called, was entered in the cellar by removing some of the stones. After the runaway was safely inside, the stones were carefully replaced, hiding all signs of the small room, which now appeared to be just a massive chimney foundation. Today it can be seen through a cutway in the first floor. This two-story portico with the pediment supported by white Doric columns is an example of the Greek Revival period between 1820 and 1840, known as the architecture of white pillars. At the junction of Elm and East Main Street, this is now Spaulding's furniture showroom. Across the street at 8 Elm is the home built by Nathaniel Nelson in 1797. During the War of 1812, when Newburyport was thought to be in danger of a British attack, the treasure was brought by mule train to the cellar of Nelson's home. The gold was hidden in a tunnel which goes through the base of the massive central fieldstone chimney. When both ends of the tunnel were sealed with fieldstone, the chimney foundation appeared to be solid stone. The tunnel, which the present owner approximates to be 5 feet by 6 inches in height, gives evidence to the quantity of gold which was hidden here. 12 Elm Street, and a close-up of the door enfrainment. Note the ionic caps on the pilasters and the dentil cornice. "13 Elm, built around 1812. This was once the parsonage for the Reverend Isaac Brayman of the South Church. Winter's tea room was in this home at 17 Elm. Note the unusual fan-like on top of the doorway and the second-story window flanked by side lights which repeats the pattern of the front door. And here is a close-up of the fan light. At 53 Elm is Captain Joshua Howe homestead. The remains of a foundation seen in the foreground once held a building known as the Senate. It was here the cronies of South Georgetown would gather to discuss politics and generally run the town. Returning to East Main, we head 1 block east to Chestnut Street, or Back Street as it was called, and is still referred to in the neighborhood. This apartment building on the corner of Chestnut and East Main was called the Hayes Block. It burned down on March 12, 1900. Further along on East Main is Rocky Hill Farm, built in 1828. The original structure was destroyed by fire. It was the parsonage for Reverend Chandler, pastor of West Rowley's first meeting house at the corner of Pillsbury Lane and East Main Street. Again, we see the wooden fan-like carvings over the front and side doors. Of interest here are the bracketed cross gables and front door hood. At the turn of the century, this home was owned by John Hills, who was married to Hannah Brocklebank. The Edward Hazen House, an excellent example of the early New England salt box, built in 1711. The north side facing East Main Street is actually the back of the house. At one time, the road passed in front of the south side of this home. Returning to the square, we proceed up North Street to number 14, as it now appears the residence of Dr. and Mrs. Field. Also on North Street is this home, which was the residence of Dr. Richmond B. Root, who followed his father in the medical profession. 3 generations, father, son, and grandson, had their practice in Georgetown. That's Dr. Root's horse and buggy out front. This current photograph brings into focus the architectural feature of the house, this 2-story porch. A closer view of the carving in the pediment and the brackets and the delicate fretwork railing. And this home at North and Pleasant Street was built around 1900 by Honorable William Arthur Butler, state senator from this district. The home was designed by his wife, Sarah Kenston Butler, who was Mrs. Natalie Tidd's grandmother. Senator Butler died suddenly in his early 50s, at the height of his career. On Pleasant Street, this was the home of Dr. Raymond Root, the 3rd generation Root. The structure, which is mansard roof, is of the Second Empire period, which emerged between 1860 and 1880. Another Second Empire observed the wooden quoins on the corners, an imitation of stone which was fashionable during that period. This striking example of Italianate style was part of the Victorian period around 1870. The 3-story pavilion or tower on the front was the Roman arched windows. On the 2nd story, with oval windows above, the mansard tower roof is complete with the ornate finial at its pinnacle, eared drip moldings, cap and windows at either side. The residence is presently occupied by Robert's Funeral Home. Walking to the end of Pleasant Street, our view back towards North Street would be of the library lawn on the left. To the right is the Italianate tower we just saw. In the far background, on the corner of North and Pleasant, is Old First Baptist Church. Returning to North Street and proceeding on to Pond Street, we come upon this 1.5-story home. Originally, the structure was built next to the Baptist Church on North Street and was moved here to number 61 Pond Street. Note the flared roof line. Now, this 20th century home with its steep gables and tile roof exemplifies the Mediterranean architecture. Adjacent to the Pearly School is this home on North Street, which is still in use as a residence. Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul M. Meader. We ask you to tune in next week for part 3 of Cameos of Old Georgetown. Adjacent to the Pearly School is this home on North Street, which is still in use as a residence. It was on Thurlow Street, which is just off North Street, that Aaron Nealon built his home near the brook. Here he and his wife are shown in front of the house. Take note of the unusual turnstile gate. Aaron Nealon died in 1909 at the age of 97. If he'd lived 4 more months, Aaron and Phoebe would have celebrated their 75th wedding anniversary. A year after his death, his wife Phoebe died at 94 years of age. She was laid to rest next to her husband in Union Cemetery. Inside this home on North Street are wall murals by Rufus Porter. Porter was an itinerant painter who traveled the byways of New England for board and keep. His murals are well known. From North Street, we turn on to Jewett Street and locate the Dixon Pillsbury Witham House, built before 1700 by James Dickinson. This beautiful early colonial has been carefully restored to its present owners. Returning to the square and proceeding down Central Street is this private residence which once was the Universalist Church. When it was owned by the church, it was on the site of our present town hall. When the structure was sold, 20 pair of oxen moved it down the street to this location at number 21. A close-up of the cupola reveals the details of the carved brackets and molding over the windows. It is quite distinctive with the double Roman arch windows on 4 sides. The first steam engine in town was garaged in the cellar of this home, which is now the offices of Dr. Lewis Skyrick. Looking out of the second-story window of Town Hall towards the square, we see, on the near right, the house we just viewed, and across the street, the home with the porch, is the residence which was once the Universalist Church. Turning down Library Street is this 1.5 story which has the small eyebrow windows referred to as lie on your stomach. Again, we have the wooden fan lights over the doorway and windows. Back on Central Street, this is Lovering's Block. These tenements were built during the Civil War on the site opposite our shopping center. The middle section was moved across the street and eventually was torn down when the shopping center was built. The 2 end buildings were taken down in the fall of 1937. And here is a view of Central Street from Soldiers Monument towards our present post office. The buildings seen here no longer exist. The lawn in front of Lovering's Block is in the right foreground. Rear right is the second St. Mary's Church with the rectory behind it. The house across the way, originally on the site of the church, it was moved here and eventually torn down when the shopping center was built. The Boynton House, built in 1882, is the large house in the rear center. It was demolished in 1969. The Fickett House, across from the post office, has such interesting features as a flat roof octagonal cupola and arched double windows under the gable. And here is a closer view of it. This impressive home, known as the Manor, once was owned by Baldpate Incorporated, a group of doctors who owned and operated Baldpate hospitals. The unusual feature here is the front door on the 2nd floor. Originally, this was a 1-story house. A second level was added by raising the whole structure and constructing a new 1st floor. In this view, it has now become obvious why those 2nd-story windows were known as lie on your stomach. The window sills are at the floor level on the 2nd floor. It used to be John Knox's home. At the corner of Nelson and Central Street is this Georgian home, which shows the symmetry of Georgian architecture. Windows and chimneys are balanced on either side of the entry. Another characteristic is the low foundation. A cupola once existed between the 2 chimneys, which explains their extreme height. A closer view of the classic pedimented entrance with fan-like and decorative pilasters at each side. Further along on Nelson Street is the Chute House, which was built in 1815 by Benjamin Adams, Jr. The area across from this home was known as Oak Dell. Built in 1802, this was the home of Saul E. Nelson, and this is the front entrance. Next to Noonan's greenhouses on Central Street is this Victorian. The barn was the scene of many local dances. And just beyond Noonan's is the Adams Herrick Howe place built by Captain Benjamin Tanner Adams in 1754. Until that time, houses were always painted with ochre. Captain Adams was the first one in town to paint his home white. And today, the home of Dr. and Mrs. Lewis Skyrick. From Vineyard Hill, looking eastward across Central and Elm Streets, we have this panorama of South Georgetown. Returning to Central Square and Soldiers Monument, we view the present Town Hall. The central projected impedimented pavilion is delineated by two-story Tuscan pilasters. Note the oval windows flanking both sides of the portico. A residence for the elderly, the Carlton home at the corner of Andover and Nelson Avenue, originally was the home of Nathaniel Nelson. The first Catholic Mass in Georgetown was celebrated in a room of Nelson's home. Across from the Carlton home's side yard on Nelson Avenue was the Kimball House, built by Charles A. Kimball, who was a carpenter and builder, and now occupied by the Pickering family. The Moses Boynton house has been torn down, but it was across the street from St. Mary's parking lot on Andover Street. Later occupants were the Spofford and Noyes families. A little further on Andover, we turn on to Baldpate Road. A short walking distance, and we come upon a dirt road on the left which leads us to the Three Wells. The home derived its name from the 3 stone wells on the property. Built in the mid-1800s, it was at one time the home of Robert Gould Shaw. He was married 3 times. One wife later became the famous Lady Astor. In the background, where you see the porch and doorway, was the entrance to the grand ballroom. At one time, there was a magnificent tree-lined drive from Andover Street through what is today St. Mary's parking lot, which led to the front entry of Three Wells. A view of Baldpate Road after a snowstorm. Ben Bailey would have taken care of that problem in short order. And back on Andover Street, we proceed to the area where the Spofford clan settled. Here is the Thurston Spofford House, built in the early 1700s. From 1948 until 1986, it was the Muscovitz Dairy Farm, and today is owned by the Kenwood Horse Farm. And this is the Sewell Spofford House at 251 Andover, and directly behind it, the barn. The barn at 258 Andover was built sometime between 1760 and 1780 by Colonel Spofford. The original structure was smaller and was made larger in 1853. We will take a right turn off Andover, down West Street, which was the stagecoach road to Haverhill. This area was known as the Bush, and here, at number 55, is a 3/4 New England salt box. At 337 Andover is the home built in 1765 by Eliza Spofford. Observe the elegant rounded porch and the turned porch posts. The fireplace in this home is still in perfect condition. Further along on Andover to Spofford Street, we find this half house. A half house was a single room or pair of rooms on one side of a chimney. As the family grew, additions were made on the other side of the chimney. The structure then became either a 3/4 or central hall house, depending upon the size of the addition. Completing our tour of houses, let's see what the inhabitants wore. Down East Main Street on a Sunday morning, Old South Church is in the background. in front of the Pentucket House lawn and the Union Block. At the waiting station in Little Block in the square. And this is St. Mary's Church on Central Street. And here we have delivering cordwood. In the background, a view of the Pentucket House. And this is on a day's outing and fashions of the times. And here is the Victorian woman in her Sunday best. And father wearing a celluloid collar. And here are some of the local gentry in the 1938 pageant. Some familiar Georgetown people who participated in the first school program, which was part of the 1938 centennial celebration of Georgetown's incorporation. Here are Doris Merrill, Betty Ann Nally, Laura Pedder, Jean Elliott, Clifton Elliott, Everett Spaulding, Louis Holt, Samuel Noyce, Rosemary Merrill Gordon, Robert Wood, and young Bill Marshall and Mary Nally. The history of Georgetown would not be complete without a view of our schools. The one-room district schoolhouses were located in various sections of Georgetown. When Central School on Andover Street was built in 1905, all the district schools were closed. This schoolhouse, Marlborough No. 1, was on East Main Street, across from the entrance to the town dump between the William Kern and Bainbridge Pool homes. Marlborough No. 1 was sold in December 1906. One half was moved to School Street, Groveland, by the purchaser, John Laborde, and the remaining half was used as a chicken coop until it deteriorated. And here is the Old South. No. 2 was on the east side of East Street, just before the Hill area. East Street used to be called Red Gate Road because there actually was a red toll gate across the road. A short distance in from Elm Street, the hill section was known as Red Shanks Hill. A favorite story is the trick the boys used to play when they wanted a day off from school. In the winter, the older boys would be sent outdoors to get wood for the stove. One of them would hitch up on another boy's shoulders and throw leaves down the chimney. The leaves falling on the fire below would fill the schoolhouse with smoke, and classes would end for the day, or at least for the morning. And here is North Street School No. 5, was originally a one-story structure at Boardman and North Streets. When the building was sold, it was turned around 90 degrees. The first floor was raised, a new first floor added, and made into an apartment house by Charles S. Boardman. The Squirrel Street School was located at North and Thurlow Streets. When sold, it was moved diagonally across North Street and is now a private residence. The Warren Street School was at the corner of Jewett and Warren Streets. Primary and Grammar No. 4 was known as the Brick School and today is owned by the Nowak Organ Company. And here is the Pearly Free High School, which was built in 1899. On January the 28th, 1935, fire gutted the interior of the structure. And here are some of the views, and it was a terribly cold morning, and it is said that it was as much as 40 below zero. You can see how difficult it must have been for the firemen and people who were responsible for extinguishing this terrible fire. And here is as it is being rebuilt. traffic detoured up north on Pond Street during the construction of Route 95. The Central School, built in 1905, it ended the era of the one-room schoolhouses in Georgetown. And this is the Hill School, number 3 on Andover Street, a few yards west of number 258, which until recently was the Purley Homestead. When the property was sold to Kenwood Farm, the Purley heirs stipulated that the last remaining one-room schoolhouse structure to be given to the town to be preserved. However, it had to be removed from the land. The Historical Commission and the Historical Society agreed that the Brocklebank Museum property would be an appropriate site to relocate the schoolhouse, since this would bring 3 historic buildings within one complex. This is the earliest picture we have of the schoolhouse, and contrary to popular opinion, it was not a little red schoolhouse, but as is visible here, it was definitely white. Through the generosity of many citizens and businesses, schoolhouse number 3 has been moved and restored, but furnishings are meager. A historical commission is seeking donations of schoolhouse artifacts and funds to purchase articles which become available. If you can help in this effort, please write to Georgetown Historical Commission at Town Hall, 1 Library Street. Further information on the history of Georgetown may be found at the Peabody Library, which has books by local authors Jane Field, Charles Flanders, and Eleanor Stetson. Also available locally are those published by the First Congregational Church and the Georgetown Historical Society. And this concludes our presentation of Cameos of Georgetown. We appreciate your having listened to us and watched, and thank you very much. My name is Paul M. Meader. Good night.